Good evening, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum at the Institute of Politics. My name is Mateo Cuerco. I'm a first year studying philosophy at the college and a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee. Before we begin, please note the exits located at the park side and the JFK street side. In the event of emergency, please walk to the closest exit and congregate in the JFK Park. Now, please take a moment to silence your cell phones and join me in welcoming Harvard College undergraduate Anjali Krishnamurti to the stage.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. My name is Anjali Krishnamurti. I'm a junior at the college studying social studies, and I am a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Christie, former governor of New Jersey, U.S. attorney, and Republican presidential candidate. Christie served as the 55th governor of New Jersey from 2010 to 2018, briefly serving as the chair of the National Republican Governors Association and running for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016 and 2024. Over the course of his lifelong career in public service at the local, state, and federal level, Christie has been known for his pragmatic leadership and efforts to engage across the aisle in a historically blue state. As governor, he led and worked on issues ranging from economic recovery to criminal justice reform. Prior to that, as U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey, he earned national recognition for prosecuting public corruption. As a fellow die-hard New Jersey resident, I'm especially looking forward to hearing his well-known love for Bruce Springsteen, the New Jerseyan of all time, whose concerts he's attended over 170 times. Moderating tonight's discussion will be Aaron Goldman, the director of the JFK Jr. Forum here at the IOP. A graduate of the University of Massachusetts, Aaron joined the IOP in the spring of 2023, following 5 years working in communications and student engagement at Harvard College. Previously, he served the city of Newton, Massachusetts for 8 years at a variety of senior positions in the office of the mayor. Please join me in welcoming Christie and Aaron Goldman to the stage.
Good evening, Aaron.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Anjali. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I hope everyone who celebrated had a wonderful Easter yesterday, and Chag Sameach to everyone who is observing Passover this week. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. Governor Christie, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Spring 2022 was the last time that you sat right here in this very spot, and I think it's safe to say that in the 4 years since, enough has happened in the world, in American politics, that we will be able to fill an hour of conversation tonight. But
fair evaluation.
But before we do that, you have a lot of future public servants, a lot of future, I hope, elected officials in the room here tonight. And I think they would really benefit from hearing your story, your journey of how you wound up here and how you wound up becoming a name that we all know and becoming a two-term governor of New Jersey.
Well, how I wound up here, I'm in trouble being here tonight because I have a son who is Princeton class of 16. He's like, "You're going to Harvard? Seriously, Dad?" So he's not thrilled, but I'm happy to be here anyway. How did I get here? It started with this guy sitting in the front row, Bob Grady, who I've known almost my entire life. And when he was working for Millicent Fenwick in her congressional office, he gave me a chance to do an internship. And as I was saying to Aaron on the way over, you know, that's the stuff that gets in your blood, and then off you go. I don't think either Bob or I thought I was going to wind up being governor or running for president, but it was a good start. And I think that, look, the journey in politics is one that lots of people try to meticulously plan out. And you'll meet many people, probably a number of people in this room, who have a meticulous plan. And very few of them ever follow that exact plan. Doesn't mean they're not going to get where they'd like to go at some point, but it's not going to follow the plan they think. And I think that there are two factors that get you someplace in this business. And I think the first one is character. You know, people can tell whether you've got it or you don't. And to me, I think people are seeing even more today that character really needs to be an indispensable part of real leadership. You can have fake leadership, you can have faux populism, you can have, being the loudest person in the room. And some of those people get elected. But the people who are going to go down in our history as true leaders are going to be the people who exude character. So that's hard. That means you've got to stand up for what you really believe in. And it means that you've got to be on the wrong side of some arguments from time to time, the losing side of some arguments. The second thing, I think, is effort. This is a hard business. And, you're not going to get someplace really meaningful in this business without working incredibly hard and being willing to do that. And not always knowing when you start the hard work where it's going to lead you to. But people notice that work. They notice if you're someone who is willing to work not just for yourself, but work for others, work for causes, work for things that are bigger than your own self-interest. And all those things, I think, are things you have to display. And it's kind of part of character as well. But, in the end, I'll just tell you one story about what, when you think about things and plan things a little bit and they do go right. I was 39 years old when George W. Bush nominated me to be U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. I was the second youngest U.S. Attorney in the country, the youngest being Strom Thurmond Jr. So that wasn't fair competition. My dad's name is Bill, and no one knew him. But the day that I found out that the president was nominating me was September 10th, 2001. And my wife and I decided to go out to dinner that night, and doing what couples do, like we both had jobs and worked, we came home, we wanted to freshen up before we went out to dinner. It was a night for us to celebrate. And so I was at the sink doing a second shave, and she was at her sink putting the makeup on. And I turned to her, I said, I'm gonna tell you something. If I do this job well, I'm gonna be governor. And she looked at me and she said, you are out of your mind. But I kind of knew that this was my path. You look for your path all the time, you probe a little bit, but you don't necessarily know. That moment I knew. Now, it counted on the fact that I would do the job well. Unfortunately, I did. But I had that feeling that night. So if you have an instinct about something to pursue, don't betray your own instincts. But don't sit down in your dorm here or an apartment and write out, a 12-point plan about which step you're going to take to where, because that one probably is not going to work. But Grady got me going. That's the guy who got me in the right direction. And I have to admit that to my son too, that it was a Harvard alum who actually got me in the right direction. So
Great. So we're sitting here, we're about 7 months away from the midterm elections. And I listened to your appearance a couple weeks ago. You were on this podcast called The Fifth Column.
Yeah, I
talked a lot.
Got a little attention.
Yeah, got a little attention. And you said something pretty remarkable that I bet earlier in your career you would not have ever imagined yourself saying, which is you said, there are no principles left in my party. And I wonder if you can explain that a little bit to us and also just reflect on what does that mean for your party's chances this November?
Well, I think the two are divisible, so let me do the first one. I think anybody who follows politics right now can tell there are no principles left in my party. And even for people who agree with some of the stuff the president's doing, if you're really honest with yourself, it's not based on principle. He wakes up every morning and tries to figure out what is the best thing for him to do in his self-interest that day. And that day only. And if it changes the next day, he'll change. He's sui generis. He is one of a kind, thankfully. But the real lack of principles is on display every day in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. These people have become lemmings. They only do what he tells them to do. And not only that, they don't even criticize him when he deserves to be criticized. He put out a post yesterday, which I'm sure many of you saw. And I was going to say exactly what he said. He said, you better open up the fucking straight, you crazy bastards. Now look, I'm from New Jersey. So you could tell that language flowed pretty easily for me. But come on, man. Like, this is, Coach Amaker knows, he coached at Seton Hall. He understands. Like, but come on. There's not one Republican, not one, who I've seen in the last 24 hours who says, okay, come on now. That's enough. Even something as simple as that. Mr. President, those words on Easter Sunday were ill-advised. They can't even do that. They're scared to do that. Because here's why, and this is where the principles come in. They care more about the title than they do about doing the job they have. The best example of this right now in the 535 members of the United States Congress is Lindsey Graham. This is a man who only cares about his title. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. He is a vapid, vacant human being. And for him to say the things that he has said about Donald Trump in the past, and all he wants to do is suck up and play another round of golf and pray that he gets the endorsement for the United States Senate. You know, lots of people in my party will say, oh, you know, it isn't the way it used to be, and people lack principles. You got to say the names if you really want to be credible on this. And there's a bunch of other ones that I'll probably say during this hour tonight. But Graham is the first one. And the reason is because a guy who was a hard-edged politician but had some principles was John McCain. And John McCain mentored Lindsey Graham. He saw him as like a son. John McCain, I can guarantee you, is spinning in his grave watching Lindsey Graham suck up to Donald Trump. And so I'm disgusted by what my party looks like in Washington. And what's it mean for the midterms? You know, probably nothing. What's going to control the midterms is that people right now are giving Donald Trump 27.72 approval ratings on inflation and 31.65 approvals on the economy. If those numbers are anywhere close to that come October, it's over. They're going to lose both houses.
So let's talk about the Democratic Party for a second, because in the same interview you said, and I'm paraphrasing this part, that the Democrats, that Trump is committing suicide, and the Democrats should just stand back and let him do it. Don't pounce on him. Why should that?
No, look, the Democrats have no good ideas either. I mean, let's be fair. I mean, they got nothing going. Nothing. They have lived on the comfort food of saying, Donald Trump's a threat to democracy since 2015. 11 years. You know, I remember talking to Kamala Harris last fall during the campaign, fall of 24. And I said to her, stop talking about Trump. Everybody who hates Trump's voting for you. That's over. Count those in the bank. There are a group of independents in this country who don't like Joe Biden and don't like Donald Trump. And they're like, good God, who do I vote for? Give them a reason to vote for you, and they will. But she couldn't help herself. Couldn't help herself. Did a big speech in front of the White House, right? And you know, all she talked about was threat to democracy. I turned off. Like, it's over. Trump's going to win. Because those independents were saying, well, we don't like Biden's policies. You know, and she goes on, look, I've been on The View because I'm an ABC News employee. And believe it or not, The View is a part of ABC News. Peter Jennings spinning in his grave, right? And so I've been on there, and you know what you're getting into when you go on there if you're a Republican. If you're a Democrat, you're Kamala Harris. Sonny Hostin threw her the biggest softball anyone's ever been thrown. Tell us one or two ways you'd be different than President Biden. Now, this is a guy at that point who had a 28% approval rating. You think you might want to come up with one or two things. She goes, oh, I wouldn't do anything different. Okay, thank you. Next, right? And I said this on that podcast as well. If I were running the DCCC right now, here's what I'd do. I would take every Democratic candidate, incumbent and challenger, and send them to Turks and Caicos till November. Say nothing. Do nothing. Shut up. You sound stupid too. But if you go to Turks and Caicos until November, you won't piss anybody off, and they'll all be just looking at Trump and going, I can't do that. All right, well, vote. Who's this? I don't really know. Heard they're on vacation, but I'm voting for them. I mean, but the Democrats won't do that, and that's what will make this more competitive than it should be. Because they'll be out there talking about crazy, crazy stuff that's been rejected by the voters. Think about this. After January 6th, after the indictments, after the fraud conviction, they lost to him. I mean, how bad do you have to be for that to happen? So, yeah, like, we're in a bad way right now. But the fact is that their problem is, in my opinion, that they have no new good ideas. And the American people are looking for, they're angry and they're desperate, because that's what Trump makes you. And what they want is someone to just say, okay, I can handle this, I can calm this down. And by the way, here are 3 good ideas. I'm not talking about an entire, white paper. Give them 3 common sense good ideas that you can articulate simply and directly. If you're a Democrat and you do that, you could win. But we'll see.
So I have to say, in the 2-minute walk over here before this event, about 4 people stopped you and recognized you to say hi. So I gather everywhere you go and around New Jersey, people are stopping and chatting and talking about politics. So what are the kinds of ground level issues that people that you're hearing about that you think Democrats or Republicans, for that matter, should be focusing on?
Hey, look, there's this now, the buzzword of the time is affordability. And we just had a governor's race in New Jersey where Mikey Sherrill was elected governor. And she basically said 4 things, right? She said, I was a helicopter pilot in the Navy. I was a former federal prosecutor. I'm a mother of 4. And I'm going to freeze electric rates. She won by 14. 14. People are concerned about the fact that they cannot pay their bills. And they don't see any hope. So I think what people have to do is to come forward with ideas that will really affect their lives. And not these like pie in the sky philosophical stuff that people are feeding them right now on both sides. And this affects the Trump voters even more, I'd argue, because what Trump voters come up to me and say after they, shoot me the bird or like yell his name in my face is, I know he's not a good guy, but I like his ideas. And my response to them is, what makes you think he can implement his ideas? Even if you like them, give me the proof that he's implemented his ideas. Because there's 2 steps to this. There's having a good idea and then having the skill to make the good idea happen. And he can't do that and hasn't done that, and that's why his numbers are where they are. And so, it's not only just having the good ideas, Aaron, it's about giving people the sense that you know how to accomplish it. And that means, I think, still in this country, working with the other side. Because you need 60 votes in the United States Senate. You see the president running around now on the Save America Act. Well, the Save America, if that's the thing that's going to save America, we're in trouble, because it ain't happening. Because you're never going to get 60 votes in the United States Senate. You've got to get real about the idea that the other side has ideas, the other side's been elected too, the other side has currency in their, if not just in their states or districts, they have currency to be dealt with, and you need to deal with them. And quite frankly, we haven't had a president that's done that since George W. Bush.
So take us into the psychology a little bit. I think you're uniquely positioned. You've known President Trump longer than most people in political circles have. You've known him for 22, 24 years, something like that.
24 years.
24 years. And in your book, Let Me Finish, which I have to say is one of the more entertaining political books I've ever read.
That's what we were shooting for.
It worked. You said that when you first met him in 2002, you very quickly concluded, okay, the guy I see on TV is the same as the private guy. Do you still feel that way? And tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is Trump. Like, it's not like when you get with him privately that he's any different than what, if any of you watched the press conference this afternoon. That's it. There's no difference. Now, every once in a while, he can put on an act. You know, he did it with Bill Maher, this famous dinner he had with Bill Maher, and Bill Maher came out charmed. And I just laughed. Bill Maher, probably one of the most cynical people I've ever met in my life. It tells you how skilled Trump is. He can charm you. He has the ability to do it. The problem is he doesn't have the patience or the discipline to do it regularly. And so he gets himself in a lather. I'll give you one example of this. There's a lot of attention from that podcast about me telling, and I was talking to Byron York on the way in about the story of Charlie Kushner and prosecuting Charlie Kushner. One of the outgrowths to that was there was a time when Ivanka Trump, had dated Jared Kushner. They had broken up. Then they gotten back together again, and it became clear to Donald Trump that they were going to get married. And he has said this publicly, that he would have rather had her marry Tom Brady, which might be the only popular thing he could say in New England, to say nice things about Tom Brady. But he was not thrilled, let's say, about this. And I was still the prosecutor at the time. I was still the U.S. attorney when this stuff was going on. And he asked me to go out to dinner. And he said, do you have anything more on the family so I can, break this up? And I thought to myself, haven't I given you enough? Like, her prospective father-in-law hired a hooker to seduce his own sister's husband, videotape it, hold it, and then send it to her on the day of her son's engagement party. I looked at him, I'm like, not enough, huh? Like, to say, that might be a family I might want to stay away from, all right? I mean, but that's Trump. Like, when he gets himself worked into a lather, he will say and do anything to get what he wants. And unfortunately, what's happening right now, in my opinion, is that he feels the presidency slipping away. Donald Trump understands poll numbers. He lies about them regularly, but he understands them. And he knows when he sees those numbers, when he sees himself 25-75 among independents in job approval, he knows he's in big trouble. And when that happens, he flails. And that's what he's doing right now. He's flailing, and that's the way to explain what you see now, is he's not stupid. That's another problem Democrats have. They think he's stupid. He is not stupid. He is undisciplined, immature, and narcissistic. But he's not stupid. That's not one of his sins. So he gets it, and he sees what's happening to himself. And this time, as opposed to the first time around, he doesn't have anybody around him who can set him straight. It's his own fault. He picked these people on purpose. He picked a cabinet of complete sycophants. When you look at some of the people, just the two people he's fired in the last couple of weeks, did anybody sit around, any political thinker sit around and go, let me see, terrorism, border crisis, customs problems and tariffs coming, all converging in one department, Department of Homeland Security. I got it, the governor of South Dakota. That's the ticket. In the great tradition of Tom Ridge, we're picking Christie Nome. I mean, you want to know what the difference between George W. Bush and Donald Trump as president? George W. Bush picked Tom Ridge. Donald Trump picked Christie Nome. He picked Pam Bondi to be the Attorney General of the United States. As someone who spent 7 years in the Justice Department, it is ridiculous on its face. But the ramifications for him are there's no one who can tell him no. There is no one who can tell him, this is wrong, sir. In the first term, he had Rex Tillerson. He had Jim Mattis. He had Bill Barr. he had people of real substance, and I'm leaving a number of them out, General Kelly, General McMaster, people who are really substantive people who could look at him and say, hold on, okay, we know you're spewing all that crap, but let's get back to what we can really do or not do here. And a guy like Bill Barr who could speak his language, who when he was telling him the election was stolen, Bill Barr looked at him and said, it's horseshit in the Oval Office, because he knew that's what Trump would understand. There's nobody like that now. You see the cabinet meetings. The only competition in the cabinet meetings is like who can come up with the more outrageous compliment for Donald Trump, and it's just, that's why he's now in a tizzy, because he's flailing and there's nobody left for him to hold on to that can get him steady. And those were his choices, though.
Well, and you've also talked about recently how there's also the reality of the clock is starting to run out. The lame duck status is approaching, which is new for him. So looking ahead to the presidency post-President Trump, you served as governor for 2 terms. You ran for president. A lot of us grew up or sort of came of age or whatever with the conventional wisdom being that governors make the best presidential candidates. And in the period from Jimmy Carter to George W. Bush, you had 4 out of 5 presidents were former governors. Now we've had 3 in a row, Obama, Trump, and Biden, who never served as governor of their state. Is that a coincidence, or does that tell us something about a changing nature of what people are looking for in presidential candidates?
Well, first of all, if you look at those presidencies, I would argue to you that there's not a successful presidency in there.
Oh, I said successful presidential candidate, or at least that's what I meant to say.
But what you're talking about when a governor, the reason governors have continued to get elected is because governors have generally been good presidents. And so people look and go, okay, that's a credential that makes sense to me. Like he or she has actually run something. Now you got to then evaluate that person. What state did they run? What is their record really? There's a big difference in my mind between Brian Kemp and Gavin Newsom. They're both governors of significant states, but with very, very different records. And I would argue one who is competent and qualified to be president and one who isn't. But as candidates, remember, the 3 people you named were and are unique individuals in American history. Barack Obama is the first African-American candidate who was a credible candidate for president of the United States. No offense to Shirley Chisholm and Jesse Jackson, but at those moments, they were not credible. He was the first credible one, and he is one of the more skilled politicians I've ever met. Okay, and he was running at a time when George W. Bush had run the Republican Party into the ground politically because of the banking crisis and Iraq, Katrina. There were a bunch of stuff that happened in his last 2 years that could really bury under, and did. And I think McCain never had a realistic chance of winning that race, not only because Obama was talented, but even more so because the country was like, okay, enough of the Republicans. You have 8 years of Obama who's like Professor Obama. No drama Obama, Mr. Cool, there's a plate of plexiglass in front of him. You're trying to touch him, you can't really touch him. And people get tired of that. So they go, okay, we need someone aggressive and tough and strong. So we get Trump. And people get 4 years of that. They go, okay, maybe too much on that. Let's go to the old guy who's been around forever and will calm everything down. Joe Biden's only, in my view, credible argument to be president was, hey, I'm more chill than him. That was it. And people were scared and tired, and they went, all right, no. And then they got 4 years of that, with the pull out from Afghanistan and enormous inflation, and he thinks he's FDR. He's not, and never would be. And then you get Kamala Harris saying she's no different than him, so you wind up with Trump again. I don't think they are, this period of our time, I call this the last gasp of the most selfish generation in American history, the baby boomers. The most selfish generation in American history, the most self-centered generation in American history, the least sacrificing generation in American history. And, you know, you look at Biden and Trump in particular, and they personify that. And how do they do it? Trump every day shows us. Biden, by running again, proved what a selfish, selfish man he is. Because everybody knew he wasn't up to it. But not him. I'm the only one who could beat Donald Trump. Well, there you go. You made your own history happen. So I do think that governors now, and when you look at the Democratic Party, most of the candidates who are being spoken about as credible now are governors. Now, whether that'll play out or not, we'll see. Because everything is great here at Harvard when people are sitting here and it's theoretical. When you get out there and actually do it among people, having done it twice, I can tell you it's a much different thing. And so we'll see if they perform or they don't. And on the Republican side, you know, I think right now the most credible Republican governor is Brian Kemp, but whether Brian will run for president or not, I really don't know. And as far as anybody who's associated with the Trump movement or the Trump cabinet, I think they will be dismissed. I don't care what the polls say right now about J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. You're going to have to wear every word, every action of Donald Trump, and neither one of those guys have Trump's charisma or charm. And that's a problem for them.
So let's go back to something you said a little bit earlier in this conversation. You talked about the need to work with the other side, that if you're whatever party you're in, you have to work with the other side. And you know, anyone in government, particularly in the executive branch, has to be prepared for unexpected, unanticipated challenges. And when you were governor of New Jersey, you had to deal with one of the more significant natural disasters that we've had here in the last 20 years or so, Hurricane Sandy. And you were very open about seeking help and embracing the help and support of President Obama and the federal government.
Never ends.
Yeah, it never ends.
Go ahead.
Well, come on, we got an hour up here. You knew I was going to ask you about Hurricane Sandy. I mean, come on, we can
Yeah,
just
well,
talk
you're
about
not really
Springsteen.
asking about Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
You're asking about Obama. Okay.
I'd like to just talk about Springsteen for an hour, but they don't want
Me
to.
too, but
Yeah.
look.
But can we get back to that? Because that was a big deal that you were
No,
a Republican governor and embraced him. Can we get back to that?
It was the last moment of national bipartisanship in this country. That moment was the last moment of national bipartisanship in this country. And one of the reasons why it was because of the way I got assailed for doing it by everybody from the Romney campaign to every candidate who was running against me in 2016. And, you know, the little known story about that is a few things. One, the Obama hug. There was no hug. First of all, if you know Barack Obama, he doesn't hug. You look at him, first of all, he doesn't hug. He's not warm. He's just not. Not a bad guy, but he's not Mr. Warmth. Second, I'd crush him if I hugged him. Like Jersey guys hug. Obama would have gone down if I hugged him. So there was no hug. What there was, I'll show you, Aaron, exactly what it is. Stand up, Aaron.
Do I get to be Obama?
You get what? No, I get to be Obama.
Oh, okay. I am you?
Okay? You're me. Shake
right.
my hand. And Obama did this.
Okay.
That was the hug. Let me tell you something, man. Where I come from, that's no hug. All right? So that's the first thing. What they were really talking about, though, was a rhetorical hug. Because we did a press conference after we toured him around, and they asked me a very simple question. How is the president doing so far on hurricane relief? And I said, I have absolutely no complaints. The president's doing a great job. And the reason I said that was because I had no complaints, and the president was doing a great job. Sorry. I got inundated with donor phone calls. And one of them came at a particularly bad time. He's a nice guy, so I won't use his name. But he called me right after we had just discovered 2 dead bodies in a basement apartment in Middlesex County, New Jersey. And I got back into the vehicles, and I was emotional. I mean, it's hard stuff to see. And this guy calls and says, people think you're endorsing Obama. You have to go on Fox News right now and say you're with Romney. Now, let's remember something. I was the first major governor in the country to endorse Mitt Romney. I was one of his top surrogates if not before Paul Ryan, his most important circuit. I raised as much money for him as an elected as almost anybody else did. I gave his keynote speech at the convention. Anybody thinks I was voting for Barack Obama is a dope, right? But I got this donor calling me, and I said, how about this? I'll go on Fox News and say that when I stop pulling dead bodies out of buildings. And I hung up. But it kept coming. And the other unknown thing about this, with Beth Myers is here, who was a key person in the Romney campaign, and she knows this is true, I invited Governor Romney to come on Friday. Obama came on Wednesday, and I said to Governor Romney, before Obama came, I called him as soon as Obama called me and told me he was coming. And so I got off the phone with Obama, and I called Romney. And I said, hey, Obama's coming tomorrow. You were a governor, you know. I can't say no, and I won't say no. It's not the right thing for me to do. And to Mitt's credit, he said, absolutely right. You do what you have to do. And that's the right thing to do. And I said, you should come on Friday. I'll give you the exact same tour, the exact same attention, because if you win this race, this is going to be your problem come the day after the election. And you should know about this. And Mitt said, it's a great idea, I'll get back to you. No one ever got back to me. He never came. And I think it was an enormous mistake. Do I think it was a mistake that cost him the election? I do not. I think he was going to lose the election anyway, but it made my situation worse. Because then it looks like, oh, I just wanted Obama, I didn't want Romney. The other interesting piece of this, and then we'll end this, is do you know who refused to let Obama come to their place? Mike Bloomberg and Andrew Cuomo. Told him, no, we don't want you to come. We don't want to get involved in politics in the last 6 days of the campaign. You had New Yorkers suffering, and they refused, and no one criticized them. Everybody's hopping on my ass for welcoming the President of the United States and treating him with respect. And those guys played the ultimate political game saying, this one could go either way, so we're not going to let him come. That's the stuff that when you do the right thing gets you really angry, because I watched those guys do it, and I had a great relationship with Cuomo. Mike Bloomberg, but I had a great relationship with Cuomo, and I said to him afterwards, how the hell did you get away with that? And he didn't answer, right? And I think he got away with it because he's a Democrat. Well, of course he supports Obama. There must have been some other very important reason why he didn't let him come in. So, I think all the way I was treated after that is the reason why it's the last bipartisan national moment, or at least part of it. Because, I heard a lot of different criticisms when I ran in 2016, but the single biggest one I heard in New Hampshire was, you hugged Obama. And I said, I'd do it again, because my state suffered $60 billion in damage. And the only person who could help me rebuild my state was the President of the United States. And I took an oath to do my job. I didn't take an oath of party, I took an oath of office. And so, but it probably, contributed to my inability to win the presidential nomination in 2016.
So in a minute, we're going to shift to audience questions. So start thinking about your questions for Governor Christie. But before we do that, I want to shift into one other policy area. So we happen to be sitting here on the night of the March Madness championship game.
Yep.
And I don't know, God knows how many bets are being placed on the game right now as
Billions.
we speak. Billions. And you were really instrumental in expanding sports betting throughout New Jersey when you were governor, which Cliff Notes version is a case that ultimately made its way to Supreme Court, overturned the federal ban on sports gambling. And I'm curious, now that we're sitting here 12, 14, whatever years later, gambling has permeated so much of society, so much of sports at every level. Do you look at that differently now? Would you do anything differently if you were to go back?
No, not a bit. The American people and individual states should get to decide what they do and what they don't do. And, I have no problem with sports gambling. The fact of the matter is that some people will get addicted and get out of control. But guess what? It's better that they get addicted when the state's running it than when the mafia is running it. The ramifications are slightly different. And I don't, I never understood the argument that having organized crime and others run sports gambling in this country was somehow better for the integrity of the sport and the integrity of our country than having the state run it, regulate it, and collect revenues from it. And frankly, the things you've seen in sports recently, the problem in the NBA and the problem in MLB, only happened because we have legalized sports gambling. Because who turned those people in? It was the sports books, who are required by state regulation to monitor unusual betting patterns, and if they see them, to report them to two entities, law enforcement and the league involved. And that's how the baseball pitchers wound up being arrested and how some of the NBA players wound up getting arrested. Now, what I would not allow if I had to do all over again, although I wasn't there when the legislation was actually passed, I was out of office by then, but if I had been there, I would have said no prop bets on college sports. I think it's wrong. I think that in a place like any college campus, if you have kids who are betting on, will he make the next free throw? Will he score X number of points? And they don't, some of those people tend to get a little bit angry and aggravated and are giving a load of crap to college athletes. So I wouldn't allow prop bets on college sports, and if I'd been governor when the legislation got passed, I would have not permitted that, and I think it should be outlawed now by the states. I think prop bets on college sports are bad because of the environment where those sports occur and the age of the athletes who, are under enough pressure as it is to perform academically and perform on the field, the court, wherever they are, to put up with that.
So there are 4 mics in the room, 2 on the floor over here, 2 up in the loge box over here. So please line up at whichever one is closest to you. And as people are lining up, my last little lightning round question, another sports question. You're on the board of directors of the New York Mets?
I am.
We're not going to talk about 1986, but...
Understood.
Yeah.
That's all we have to talk about,
right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, true. But we're about a week and a half into the season so far. What do you think of the new ABS system where you can challenge the balls and strikes?
Love it. Tired of having bad umpire calls decide games, decided bats. We should be trying to get it right. I like it, and it puts the burden on the pitcher, the catcher, or the batter to decide. And they all complain about now you got to put your money where your mouth is, and you got 2 challenges a game, so you better be right, because when you're wrong, you hurt your team. So I like it. I think it's great.
All right, my man over here in the blue shirt, and for everyone, please introduce yourself if you would like, and ask a brief emphasis on the brief question, please.
Very brief question. Hello, my name is Klaus Hecking. I'm a journalist. I work for Der Spiegel. It's a German news magazine.
Yep.
Just one question. Will we see fair and equal elections in November, in midterms, and will we see fair and equal elections in 2028, in the presidential elections?
We've never not had fair and equal elections, so we'll have them again. The crap that Donald Trump put out there about the 2020 election is fiction. It's make-believe. And by the way, I was there in 2020. He doesn't even believe it. He didn't believe it. He thought he lost. And he was afraid he was going to lose all during that fall. So it's all a bunch of make-believe stuff. So yeah, we'll have fair. Look, I'm from New Jersey. One of my predecessors was Brendan Byrne, who has since passed away. One of his famous lines was, I made my wife promise that when I die, I'll be buried in Hudson County so I can remain active in politics.
I was rather referring to, let's say, what's happening with gerrymandering right now, rather from the other side,
Well, gerrymandering is a problem. Both parties do it. They're actively doing it now to combat each other, to try to make the elections less representative. But, I don't think there's anything we're going to be doing about that anytime soon. I think the elections themselves are fair. Whether every district is really equal, I think it's obvious it's not. But, I don't think either party is going to give in on that one.
Let's go up here in the gray shirt.
Good evening, Governor Christie. My name is Fabio. I am a first year at Harvard College studying economics and government. The 2016 election was one of the first elections like I remember, especially the Republican primary. And one of the things that always stuck with me was in the presidential debate where you basically ended Marco Rubio's campaign. So with a lot of your debate performance. And I think ever since you've been a big part of Republican Party debate preparations. So I was wondering a little bit more from like a candidate perspective, like what is it like to be on the debate stage, and like what are some of the things that you do when getting ready for these presidential debates?
What's it like to be on the stage?
Yes.
It's great. I mean, come on, think about it. Like, you're one of, 7 to 10 people who are seeking your party's nomination for president. For a kid from Livingston, New Jersey, yeah, it's great. So everybody talks about, oh, it's nervous, it's pressure. If that's pressure, you have no business being president, because that's pressure. So that's it. On debate prep, 2 people who prepped me in 2024 were Beth and Peter, who are sitting up here, and they will tell you that I am difficult to prep. And I think rightfully so. Look, I think the job of debate preppers depends on the skills of the candidate. If Peter and Beth were trying to cross-examine me to shake me, that's a waste of my time and their time. But what they did do was remind me of what are the things you want to make sure you say at some point in that 60 to 90 minutes. Regardless of what you're asked, there's a few things you're going to want to make sure you say. I needed to be reminded of that because I'm one of these guys who, unfortunately, listens to the question and actually answers it, which most don't. And they needed to remind me that I had to play the game the way it was played, not necessarily by the way I wanted to play it. Every other candidate has, their own kind of problems that you have to deal with to get them ready. The only candidate I've ever prepped is Trump. Look, if you really, if you're getting close to exams, right, in a few weeks, if you want some way to make sure you stay up, I'll tell you this, here's a hint. Picture me playing Hillary Clinton debating Donald Trump. That will keep you up at night. And that's what I did in 2016. And my test there was to beat him senseless. And I did. And he'll tell you that. I mean, to the point where after the second debate, which was the one right after the Access Hollywood situation, he called me from the stage after the debate was over and he goes, oh, this was easy. Compared to dealing with you for the last 2 weeks, this was easy. Let's do it again. And I think prep has to adapt to the candidate. If a prep person comes in with their predisposed way of doing it, they're probably not going to be helpful. You have to evaluate who the candidate is, what's his weaknesses or her weaknesses, and then try to buttress those up, not have some standard way of doing it.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Let's go over here. You can lift that thing up if you need to.
Hello, Governor Christie. Thank you for being here. My name is Chris. I'm a New Jersey resident, a student athlete here at the college. I'm a sophomore studying government economics, and much like yourself, a Boys Nason, New Jersey senator. So a lot of overlap in what you're saying.
Yeah.
And,
where are you from in Jersey?
Morristown, New Jersey.
Morristown. Okay.
Yeah, south.
Right. I know. I was governor.
Fair enough. My question for you is, where is the home for the libertarian conservatives that are not asking what more can the government do, but what less can the government do within national politics right now?
There's not one. It's not one. I had a college professor who told me something one time about Republicans. He said, when Republicans get themselves in trouble, and I said, when? And he said, when they think they can out-Democrat the Democrats. They never can. And that's what Trump's tried to do. He's tried to out-Democrat the Democrats, and you can't. No matter how much Republicans spend, Democrats will spend more. No matter how invasive you try to make the government in order to try to fix a problem, they'll go further. But Trump, the narcissism forces him to put the federal government into everything. Like he signed an executive order the other day on NIL, and what? You have no jurisdiction. No one's going to pay any attention to you. The hell is your jurisdiction for an executive order on how many years of eligibility Amicus players should have? I'm sure, Tommy, you were up at night going through the executive order going, how can I work inside this great structure that the president just put together? Bullshit, nothing, right? That's who he is. He doesn't respect the limits of government. And he doesn't criticize Supreme Court justices for not being originalists or textualists. He just criticizes them when they don't agree with him. And so, there's no place right now for a small government libertarian except to hang in there. Nothing in politics in America is ever permanent. Never. So hang in there. It'll come back around. But you got to try to help make it come back around. Can't just sit on the sidelines.
Do my best.
Good,
Thank you for your
good
time.
job for Burlington County. Next.
Hi, thank you for your time here. My name is Roy. I know you talked about many of Trump's presidency problems like appointments, discipline, and much more. But I want to ask you if you also think that he suffers from his own success. I think he got to his voters much more than I would expect him to get on several issues, like the social discourse. It's changed entirely. Here in HKS, Republicans didn't feel comfortable to speak in the past. It changed completely. You have the affordability. Inflation was mostly under control until last month with the war. Venezuela is much bigger success than I would expect. And immigration, border crossings fell to almost zero. So to some extent, he's no longer needed to the problems he championed for. Do you think that's also his problem?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, look, I would give him absolute credit on the border. He did what needed to be done. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. Everything else he's done in immigration has been a failure and has roiled the country in ways that it didn't need to be done that way. You can remove people. Remember, he told us, we're going to remove the worst of the worst, the criminals. And that's not what he's done. He's done a lot more than that. And that's why, in my opinion, things have gotten out of control. On inflation, inflation was never under control. It was never at the 2% that he promised he was going to get it to. And he said he was going to fix all that on day one. I knew that was ridiculous. But lots of voters just listen and say, okay, he said it, he's going to do it. So some of the things that you're citing as successes, I would argue to you, are not nearly the success that he makes them out to be.
Nothing would ever be, but it's more of a success than we would expect, I would say.
Well, if that's what you're willing to settle for, good for you. But I'm not. If I promise something, I'm supposed to deliver it.
Don't you see Venezuela as a huge success?
No, I don't. The fact that you have Maduro's vice president running Venezuela, a woman who participated in the very same acts that Maduro did, that's a great success?
Better than I would expect.
Oh, better than you would expect. Well, congratulations. We have the exact same regime in place, except for Maduro. And this is Trump's problem, because he thinks a man is the problem. And it very rarely is just one person. And the system in Venezuela is still as corrupt. The people are still as downtrodden. The economy still is bad. The freedoms are still non-existent. But he's got Maduro in jail in Brooklyn. Okay. People say, you disagree with it? I don't disagree with it. I just say, really, that's a success? Yes. The military success was extraordinary. It was breathtaking that they were able to do what they did. But he had nothing to do with that except to order it. They executed it. And I just think that, look, on Argentina, it is very much, incomplete grade. Let's see what happens here. Oh, he's going to take all the oil, right? Has he? Oh, I don't know, right? To me, it's what he does. He is a carnival act. Look at me, I did this over here. Don't look at any of this stuff over here. But right up here, the shiny thing, right here, I got Maduro in jail. Great, Maduro's a bad guy. No one wants Maduro in office. But if I told you, we're gonna put American soldiers in harm's way to replace Maduro's president with his vice president. You're telling me okay, I'm in on that. Let's go. I just don't buy it. Now, like I said, on the border, I think he's done real good things. There are aspects of the big, beautiful bill that I agree with. And he jammed that through, and he deserves credit for that. But beyond that, you know, he said he was going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. How's that going? Oh, well, he didn't really mean 24 hours. I mean, and you have to give him credit for what? He said he was going to fix Gaza. If you live in Israel right now, you don't think Gaza's fixed. And if it is to any extent, it's because the Israeli, the IDF fixed it, not the United States.
Let's go right over here.
Hi, Governor Christie. My name is Jerry. You mentioned at the beginning that you think that your party has no more principles. I believe that even people without principles have to believe that they have principles, at least to themselves, right? They have to think that they are good people. I was wondering if you could give us a window into what you think the people in the administration or in the party, like the story they tell themselves.
Well, there's a difference between the people in the administration and the president, right? So the president, I'll just tell you one story. In 2018, I was home one late Saturday afternoon. The phone rang. It was the President of the United States. He was in Bedminster. The Bedminster Golf Club that he has is like 20 minutes from my home. And he said, hey, what are you doing tonight? Melania's away on some soccer trip with Barron. I don't want to eat dinner by myself. Can you come up and have dinner with me? And I said, well, it's Saturday night. I don't go out without Mary Pat on Saturday night. If I could bring Mary Pat, I'll come. Oh, absolutely, bring Mary Pat. We go up to have dinner with the president, just the three of us. And he starts telling my wife the story about Access Hollywood. Now, why you would pick that story to tell my wife is probably a judgment issue. But to give him some credit, he was telling that whole story to try to get to a point where he was telling her, you know what a good guy your husband is, that when all this was going on, we were in the middle of debate prep when it came across. And everyone else is talking about the politics of it. And he comes and sits next to me, and we're on the 26th floor at Trump Tower, and his apartment's on 63. And he said to me, what do you think I should do? And I said, I'd get my ass up to 63 as fast as I can, because if you lose her, the election doesn't matter. And he goes, that's what your husband did. He was the only one concerned about my wife and the only one concerned about my marriage. He then went on to discuss how he dealt with his wife when he eventually did get upstairs, which was to tell her it's all bullshit and there's no truth to it, even though it was on video. And he kept saying it and saying it and saying it. That's what he's telling my wife. And then he looks at my wife, he goes, remember something, Mary Pat. If you say something enough times, whether it's true or not, it becomes true. Now, that's the principle. That's how the president convinces himself. As to the people around him, they're not trying to convince themselves. They have a title. They're in the cabinet. They sit around the cabinet room. People call them Mr. and Madam Secretary. They're getting to do some good things from time to time, both for the country and for themselves. They can't, none of them, well, maybe a few of them because they're stupid, but none of the smart ones can rationalize what they're in the middle of. So don't give them that much credit. And the president, just remember, if you say something enough times, whether it's true or not, it becomes true. He doesn't say you can convince people. That's different. He says it becomes true. That's what he thinks about the 2020 election. He says it enough times, it becomes true. That's the principle he lives on.
We're running out of time, but I want to try to get maybe two more quick ones, so let's go up here first.
Hi, Governor Christie. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm also a Boys Nation alumni, so
There you go.
Very excited to see you here. I wanted to ask about the Trump administration's attacks on higher education. Both Harvard, Princeton, a lot of other universities have seen research funding frozen, international students targeted. The administration's trying to control what universities can and can't teach. I wanted to know your perspective on both why the administration's targeting universities and your thoughts on how universities have responded.
Well, there's a couple of things to be said here. Universities, many of them, in the main, got themselves in their own fix. Look, the university system in this country, especially the private universities in this country, have drifted further and further and further left in their hiring practices. It's just true. I was at a conference when the president of Princeton was asked, how many of your humanities professors are right of center? And he said, 15%. And I texted my son, who is a Woodrow Wilson School, that doesn't exist anymore either, Woodrow Wilson School graduate at Princeton, and I said, Ice Gruber just said 15%, what do you think? He said, take the one off the front. So Ben Sasse, who is at the time the president of the University of Florida, was on this panel, and he said, name them. Now at Princeton, what they do all the time is they go, Robbie George, the only conservative at Princeton. And he goes, yeah, I know, and we all know Robbie George. He says, the answer was Robbie George and others. So Ben Sasse, who's just great, looks at him and goes, who's the others guy? I never heard of others. Literally, Chris Eisgruber couldn't name another. So part of the university's problems are self-inflicted in my view. But as often happens with the president, he's going after something that people want him to go after, which is too much of a liberal bias in major universities. But he goes at it with a meat axe rather than a cleaver, rather than a scalpel. And so he's forcing, this is what you have to teach. This is who you have to fire. I'm withholding all your research money. I'm going to hurt all these other things. And so he loses the argument because he attacks a problem that can be excised, and he does it anyway, he just bloodies the whole thing. And look, I think some universities responded well and some not so well. And the testimony by some of the university presidents, including the one here in front of Congress, was an unmitigated disaster. Like, you're in charge of a university that is educating America's youth. You have an obligation to answer some questions in a way that makes people think that you're in touch with reality. And their answers on the anti-Semitism issues at universities, in my mind, were just ridiculous. It does not justify what Trump did and is doing. But we can't just sit here and say, and give in my opinion, some kind of blanket defense of the system, because the system has failed a lot of students over time. But as he often does, and when I say to these people, they say, I like his policy on universities, great. How did he implement it? What's changed in a sustainable way? And they have a harder time answering that question. So, again, what he does is he lowers things to the worst common denominator, the lowest common denominator. So now everybody's arguing with each other about something that won't fix any problems. And in fact, makes certain things where there weren't problems and makes them worse by diminishing universities' abilities to contribute to cures for diseases, innovation in lots of other ways. And so I think you've got a problem that needed to be fixed, and he screwed up fixing it.
Thank you.
So we're in overtime here, but let's get in one last question, and then we'll...
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Governor
Sure.
Christie. My name is Sylvia. I'm a junior in the college, and I'm from Montclair, New Jersey. Proud Montclair High School alum.
There you go.
I have to say, I didn't know that you went to, or that you're from Livingston, and that makes me look at you a little bit differently now.
There you go. I don't know what that means, but I'm gonna take it as a positive.
We were rivals in high school. So,
We were.
I have a two-part question. The first one is, I was wondering if you think our institutions are up to the challenge of meeting the modern-day political scene right now, or if you think there are actually structural things that have to change, whether that's constitutional or with the structure of government or otherwise. And my second part is, I was wondering if you think Central Jersey exists.
Well, that's easy. Central Jersey exists.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is this a controversy in New Jersey?
Yes,
that
it
I
is.
didn't know about? Okay.
There's some people who think there's only North Jersey and South Jersey. There are people who reject the idea of Central Jersey, but Woodbridge is Central Jersey. I would even argue to you, that Burlington County is Central Jersey. And if you're from Vineland, New Jersey, in Cumberland County, and it takes you almost 2 hours to get to Moorestown, there's the Central Jersey. That's not all South Jersey. So we clear that one up pretty quickly. And also, it's Taylor ham, not pork roll. So if that question comes up as well, thank you. So these are the things that get people worked up in New Jersey, huh? Can I tell you? On the institutions, look, I think the single biggest harm that Donald Trump has caused is the discrediting and the dismantling of important institutions. Now, not every institution that he's attacked or dismantled would I consider to be an important one. But what he's done to the Department of Justice, I believe, will take a decade to try and fix. And you say, well, that's hyperbole. My old office has been the centerpiece of the problems in the District of New Jersey. He appointed first a guy who had never had any kind of leadership ability at all to the job, kept him there for 3 weeks, and then made him the ambassador to Namibia. I don't know whether he pissed him off or what, but he's off in Namibia now. Then he nominated Alina Habba. Enough said. And she was then removed by the Circuit Court of Appeals because the appointment was illegal. Then he appointed 3 people to be U.S. attorney. It's kind of hard for 3 people to do the job at the same time. That was rejected by the courts. In the meantime, an office of 150 AUSAs, which is the 5th largest office in the country, is down to 100. 50 AUSAs have quit rather than do what Alina Habba was telling them to do. And so bad that 2 things happened in the office. The old rule was to be hired as an AUSA, you had to have at least 3 years of experience before you could become an assistant U.S. attorney. The Justice Department has now said, we'll hire you straight out of law school. I want you to think about somebody who's never practiced law, never stepped into a courtroom, who is prosecuting federal crimes and making those judgments every day. Second, one of the people at the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey was advertising on LinkedIn for AUSAs. LinkedIn. When I was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, we had anywhere from 80 to 100 applicants for every opening. They had so few people who were applying for jobs, they had to advertise on LinkedIn. Not to mention what he's done in terms of attacking his enemies, ordering people as president to engage in certain criminal prosecutions. I think that no matter who wins next time, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, the only way to begin to fix the Justice Department is for that president to appoint someone of the opposite party to be Attorney General. It has to be someone that that president trusts and believes in their judgment. But the only way we're going to convince people that every prosecution isn't because of what party you belong to is to make that, for a period of time, a nonpartisan position because of what he's done. And, you know, like, look, Barack Obama contributed to this. When you hire your wingman to be the Attorney General, it's like Nixon hiring John Mitchell. Everybody was critical of that. Obama hires Eric Holder. Well, that's okay. It wasn't okay. You can't have your best friend be Attorney General because then the line blurs. Are you the country's lawyer or are you my lawyer? Trump doesn't want the line blurred at all. My lawyer. My lawyer. That's who's going to be the Attorney General. So, as Trump often does, Obama started something that I think diminished the Department of Justice from where it was when he founded it after George W. Bush, and Trump put it on steroids. Said, okay, not only will I appoint someone who's like, you know, my sycophant, but I will send public posts out directing her who to prosecute. I can tell you in 7 years in the Bush 43 Justice Department, the White House never called me, not once, about anything I was doing from a criminal perspective, nor did the Attorney General of the United States ever call me and say, do this, don't do that, in terms of an individual case. They would say to you, hey, our policy is we want to do more on gun, cases, do more on gang cases, we want to do more white-collar cases. That's all perfectly permissible for a president to say, this category of crime, in my opinion, is one that needs more attention. Focus on that. That's different than say, indict Aaron, would you? Because, yeah, it's a white-collar thing, but I really don't like him. He pissed me off one time, so would you please indict him? There's obviously qualitative difference to that. That's And what happens with Trump supporters is they say, well, what about Obama? What about Eric Holder? What about this whataboutism? My mother taught me 2 wrongs don't make a right. And someone at some point on the Justice Department in particular is going to have to rise above the back and forth. And, you know, like Donald Trump's going to pardon every member of his family on the way out the door, the same way Joe Biden did, which was a gross, horrible act, an abuse of the pardon power. But why did he do it? He did it because he was afraid Trump was going to go after his family. Now, what's Trump going to do? Trump's going to pardon his family because he's afraid that whoever's next is going to go after his family. This is the disintegration of that institution. There are others I could point to, but in my view, none worse than the Department of Justice. Because the Department of Justice and our Article 3 judges, it what makes us different than every other ridiculous faux democracy around the world, is that when you get to the water's edge on justice, on jailing people or not, on rooting people's reputations or not through the use of the criminal process, we stop at the water's edge. And we don't anymore. And that's going to be hard to repair. And we all are going to suffer from that. All of us, whether you're involved in the legal business or not, whether you're just an American citizen, your own sense of right and wrong. The last thing I'll tell you is this. President said a lot of things about me over the course of the last number of years, has instructed Pam Bondi to prosecute me. You know, I have 4 children, and they read this stuff and hear it. And about 8 weeks ago, my 25-year-old son was home on a Saturday, and he was shooting hoops out in the front. And he came in, and he looked as white as York's shirt. And he said, "Dad, the FBI is here." I said, "And they want to see you." And I said, "Okay." So I got up, and he goes, "Is this it?" Now, people can criticize me for a whole bunch of things, but no one's ever accused me of coming within 100 yards of breaking the law. You can disagree with my policies, you can disagree with my rhetoric, you can disagree with, you know, my tie, whatever you want. But no one has ever accused me of breaking the law. And my 25-year-old son is pale and asking me, "Is this it?" And I said, "Well, we're about to find out." And I walked out the driveway, and the reason that they were there was to let me know that I needed to close one of my social media accounts because it had been hacked by the Russian FSB. Now, whether or not that was, you know, Trump motivated or not, I don't know. But I came back in and I said, I got to close down the social media account because it's gotten hacked by like the Russian FSB. And my family was completely relieved. Think about that. My social media account is hacked by a foreign government. My family was like, "Thank God." Look, I have spent a good part of my life in public service. You know, I served as a county office holder. I served as the United States Attorney. I served as a 2-term governor. I ran for president twice. I've given a lot to my country, and I don't regret 1 minute of it at all. And I tell my children that all the time. Not only do I not regret a minute of it, I revel in it. It was the most exciting time of my life and the most useful time of my life from a professional perspective. But because I disagree with the President of the United States, I'm now subjected to that. And believe me, if he could find anything that I did wrong, they'd be coming. And that's not the country we live in. We used to think about that as like banana republics did that, not the United States of America. And so you're right to focus on institutions. Democrats are wrong to focus on threat to democracy. we're going to have elections. We're going to have fair elections. You can worry about whether it's gerrymandered or not or whatever, but the votes are going to be cast. The votes are going to be counted. They're going to be cast fairly in the main. They're going to be counted fairly all the time. And we're going to have a winner of any of the number of elections that we have across the country. He's not a threat to democracy. He's a threat to the underlying institutions, their validity, their soundness. And the American people have never had less trust in our institutions than they have right now. And, you know, I wouldn't want that to be my legacy. So if all of you are focused on that, and especially the people who come out of law school here, you know, go out and do 3 years, make a bunch of money at one of the big law firms, and then leave and go back to the U.S. Attorney's offices and start to rebuild them. Because that's what's going to continue to make us a country of laws and not men or women. That's what makes us different. And that's the part of what's happened with Donald Trump that offends me by a long, long shot more than anything else, because that's the one I think that's going to be the toughest to repair.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being with us tonight. Governor Christie, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Thank you.